let's look at Witness now to see how Act 1 is structured. Then for next week, as I say, you'll watch all of Witness, you'll have a sense. But what you can also do is, hopefully, as I say, I'm not much of a lecturer, this is supposed to be an interactive class, so as we're talking, if you get ideas for various scenes, please make notes. And then when you watch these, the first act or the first 3 sequences of the movie, you can start to see, how they did scenes that were about certain subjects, what scenes came into your mind, do they seem good or bad. And it's amazing how wonderfully effective our intuitions are, because in part, we have seen thousands of movies, and we do know how this is done. It's just a question of finding an organizing principle that allows you to use your experience on a new story. So, again, in the frontispiece, which is the breakdown, we have Act 1, which asks, what is the main character's dream? And one of the ways that I found to organize a movie, a screenplay, which has gone into in a lot more detail in my book, How to Write a Screenplay in 10 Weeks, which you can get on the web, is to take a model movie that's 120 minutes long, 2 hours, and to break it into 10-minute chunks because they're easy to work with. And obviously, 120 divided by 10 is 12, so we have 12 sequences, and you'll see that the 12 sequences break them down into 3 sequences per our new act chunk. So Act 1, which is roughly 30 minutes, covers the following action. Okay, and again, you can read about it on page 9, but I'm going to paraphrase it. Okay, what is the main character's dream? Okay, now, even though the film begins with Rachel, as you remember, there's that incredible scene, all those scenes of the Amish country and the fields of wheat, the movie is actually about John Book. So, but because we have come upon Rachel first, we could say, well, Rachel's dream is to deal with the death of her husband and not to be rushed into marriage to Daniel, which is why she takes her son and leaves to go off to visit relatives outside of Philadelphia. But it's John Book's movie, and when we meet him, as you know, there's been a murder in the subway bathroom, and the young boy, Samuel Lapp, has seen the murder, and John Book, played by Harrison Ford, is the detective. And we see immediately that he is a good cop, and his only interest is to catch the guy who committed the murder of a fellow cop. And we can infer from that first scene that he is a man whose dream is to be a good cop. Now, before we go further, take a minute, and if I've had any luck at this, whatever a scene that would define your main character's dream has popped into your head. So think about it. In The Godfather, we have that scene at the wedding where they're sitting and they're eating lasagna, and Luca Brasi is preparing a speech, and Kay, played by Diane Keaton, says to Michael, played by Al Pacino, who is that scary-looking man? And Michael tells the story about how that is Luca Brasi, and he works for my father, and tells the story about how his father made someone an offer they couldn't refuse, which meant holding a gun to their head and saying, either your brains or your signature are going to be on this contract. And, you know, Kay is horrified, and Michael says, oh, that's not me, that's my family. And so that scene, without, you know, making it into a lecture, clearly defines for us what Michael's dream is. So without getting too worried about whether you're going to do it well or not, can you take a moment now and summon a scene that would describe what your character's dream is? And that's what I'd like you to think about. And if so, just make a note. I mean, there are more things that go into it, but that is the primary scene that will help you, you know, really get, that's the linchpin of your screenplay. Because once we have that scene, from that, the rest of your movie will flow. If you get the scene, please be kind enough to share them with me and send them in. And if you're specific, I can certainly speak to them next week and talk about how we can then take that and move it into the next part of the movie. So Anyway, that's the pivotal scene that we meet John Book, and we understand that he wants to be a good cop, and that he's going to be thwarted because the only person who saw the crime is this little Amish boy. The next thing is that that happens is that he has to take care of his witnesses, and again, the next pivotal scene is that Samuel, the little boy, identifies from a photograph Danny Glover, whose name is McPhee in the movie, as the killer of another cop. And that now creates the primary conflict, which is what Act 2, Part 1 is, which is called The Nightmare, which we're going to discuss next week, in which how can you be a good cop when you are having to chase a killer who is also a cop. And that's one of the reasons it's a great movie. That's why I teach it. A small story is that when I wrote this book, my mother, who helps me edit and is wonderful and is my lawyer, said to me, "But Marilyn, why are you using Witness? It's not that great a movie. Why aren't you using one of the immortal films?" And I laughed and I said, well, it is one of the great films because from a craft perspective, from a screenwriting perspective, it is a masterful job at taking a very small event and turning it into a magnificent story. And it is workmanlike and masterful in its use of the structure. So the complexity, the organic conflict of a cop who wants to be a good cop having to chase another cop, because we all, because we watch cop shows, understand that the one thing you don't do when you're a cop is turn on another cop, especially if that cop works for your boss or is your boss, means that we have to do almost no work because the problems in the story are there for us. And this is one of the ways that you can overcome passive hero syndrome, because otherwise, if it were just, a cop trying to catch a bad guy, except for trying to find out who the killer was, it would basically be an episode of TV. What elevates it and makes it a much greater conflict is because he has to come and understand that it's impossible to be 100% good cop, and that sometimes good cops do bad things. And that's where we get the kind of complexity and the kind of moral lessons that we're seeking in a screenplay. Now, the other part of the story is that his dream is to be a good cop. Now, part of his character is that he has no personal life, does not want to be distracted, and for all of his desire to do good, doesn't really have a very loving attitude towards other human beings. And because of the religious convictions of his star witnesses, he is forced out of his usual callous model to actually take care of them as people. And at the end of this first act, he realizes that not only is his boss possibly corrupt, but that he may have placed them in mortal danger. And so he must abandon being a good cop in the traditional sense in order to save his two witnesses and take them out across the jurisdiction lines. And himself is also shot in the process. So the idea that by working so intensely with your character's dream to be a good cop, that as a writer, you can then come up with a million ideas about what would really challenge that dream the most, is what you want to be doing for me next week.